It all commenced with a glimmer on August 6, 2025, moment so quiet, so sterile in a lab, and yet so deeply unsettling in its implications. The James Webb Space Telescope, the most effective observatory in human history, was forced into emergency override mode, not for a supernova, not for a black hole, but for something far closer, and far more terrifying, a comet, or at least something that looked like one. Designated 3I Atlas, it was first assumed to be another interstellar wanderer, cold, silent, and predictable, but when ground sensors locked on and the first wave of data poured in, what they captured wasn't simply unexpected, it was impossible. The chemical signature it revealed failed to match any known natural model. The ratios were grotesque, the elements mismatched, the behavior erratic, and as the numbers kept arriving, one question quietly threaded its way through the minds of every astrophysicist watching the feed. What if this is not a comet at all? What if this is something else? The first signal that something was profoundly wrong came from the comets, coma, the glowing envelope of gas surrounding its nucleus. Normally, at this distance, 6 astronomical units from the sun, a comet should be asleep, frozen, inert. The sunlight out there is weak, far too feeble to drive any meaningful outgassing. But 3I Atlas was already active violently. So James Webb detected spectral lines dominated not by water vapor, as expected, but by carbon dioxide. A great deal of it 8 times more than water. That ratio, 8:1, wasn't merely unusual. It was unprecedented. Typical comets barely reach 0.7. Ivan Borisov, the last confirmed interstellar visitor, hovered around 0.5. This was something else entirely. A body venting carbon dioxide at a rate that could not be explained by temperature or solar proximity. It was as though the object had been designed to release this specific compound under conditions where nature would never allow it. Stranger still, the coma was ghostly thin. There was almost no dust, no solid debris, no chaotic sprays gas. Controlled, clean, and highly specific gas emissions, hinting at a form of chemistry alien to our understanding of comet formation. As the network of telescopes focused more deeply, the story grew darker. Sensors detected something even more disturbing than gas. Nickel. Strong, steady nickel spectral lines appeared across ultraviolet and near-infrared bands, not noise. Not anomalies, but powerful, repeatable signals. Clear, real nickel signatures, stacked perfectly above the background, increasing in intensity as the object drew closer. At 3.8 astronomical units, output already exceeded 10 atoms per second. By 2.85 astronomical units, it had increased by an entire order of magnitude. But the shock wasn't the presence of nickel, it was what was missing. Iron across every instrument from Webb to the Very Large Telescope to Gemini was absent. Flat, silent, no trace, no noise, and that absence was impossible. In every natural comet or meteorite ever observed, nickel and iron occur together. Their ratio is tightly bound, roughly 1 part nickel to 15 parts iron. Always. 3I Atlas shattered that rule in the most violent way imaginable. Nickel outweighed iron by more than 40-1. No known natural process can produce such a split. In laboratories, isolating these metals requires energy, machinery, intent, and yet, here was an object drifting through space, performing the separation passively or, perhaps not passively at all, even before the chemistry was fully decoded. Another anomaly seized the attention of the Pan-STARRS monitoring network. 3.1 Atlas was accelerating, but not in any way a comet should. It was too far from the sun, too cold for sublimation jets to generate thrust. And yet, over just 72 hours, its velocity increased by 0.12 meters per second squared. That number sounds small, but for a body 11 kilometers wide, the size of a city, the force implied is enormous. It was like watching a cruise ship accelerate in the middle of a dead calm ocean with no engines. The change wasn't smooth either. Analysts observed micro-jump stittery flickers layered atop the main trajectory as if something inside the object were switching on and off repeatedly. Attempts to explain it through outgassing, crust fracturing, or solar wind interaction failed. None fit the rhythm. None explained the regularity. Every 7.2 hours, 3I Atlas brightened sharply. A lighthouse. The brightness curve wasn't chaotic, like tumbling debris. It was locked, clockwork. Some suggested a sheet-like surface reflecting sunlight. Others proposed a hollow, rotating body. But one fact became undeniable. This was not a rock, it was something moving with precision. And this is where science begins to tremble, because when randomness, sublimation, and natural structure all fail, What remains is a possibility no one wants to face that. 31 ATLAS is engineered, built, manufactured, perhaps unintentionally. Perhaps it is debris, a fragment of a vessel from a civilization that died before Earth grew forests, or perhaps it is something worse, something active, a probe still functioning, a mechanism still responding, a system that sees us and does not care, one that follows a trajectory set not by nature, but by design. Because no comet should awaken in deep freeze, emit metallic nickel without iron, accelerate without fuel, and rotate with mechanical rhythm. And yet here it was, doing all of that in front of our most powerful instruments. Without even attempting to hide, the James Webb override was not merely a technical response. It was a whisper of panic and unspoken consensus that this was not normal, that we might, for the first time, be looking directly at alien machinery. And even if we are wrong, the simple fact that we can no longer tell the difference, that alone is the warning. As acceleration data ignited debate across observatories, a new stream of evidence emerged, one even harder to dismiss as natural. The light curve, photometric data from Gemini South, and the testbed telescopes revealed periodic brightening of 3I Atlas every 7.2 hours. On its own, that would not be remarkable. Many comets and asteroids tumble, reflecting sunlight in repeating patterns. But this was no chaotic tumble. The brightness spikes were too clean, too precise. They did not fade gradually or flicker irregularly like an uneven rock. They appeared and vanished like a beacon on and off, at perfect intervals, even while gas emissions multiplied and the object increased. Yet this light rhythm didn't change. It held its cycle like a metronome. This stability suggested something far more deliberate, something that wasn't just responding to sunlight randomly, but reacting with precision. Some theorized it could be a light sail, an extensive reflective structure designed to capture solar radiation. Such a device could, in theory, account for both the acceleration and the regular flashing pattern. Others proposed a rotating platform with flat panels, but all agreed. The behavior failed to fit any known natural object. This wasn't a spin, it was a signal, a mechanical pulse. And with every pass, it whispered the same message to the instruments. Watching from Earth, I am not what you think I am. The moment everything shifted came not from the object itself, but from the people observing it. On August 6th, at 2:11 GMT, ground-based observatories sent an alert to the Internet Command Center. The spectral data, pouring in from multiple telescopes, could not be ignored. Co-emissions were off the charts. Metallic readings, spiking, and a sudden velocity curve defied all gravitational logic. That's when it happened. The emergency overread, a rare protocol that interrupts all scheduled observations and diverts the James Webb Space Telescope from its long-term mission to investigate a single anomaly. It's a move that burns precious time, fuel, and budget. And it has been executed only a handful of times since the telescope was launched, never before for an interstellar object. Within minutes, the override chain climbed past committees, over mission timelines, and landed directly on the desk of the project scientist. The approval had to be unanimous, and it was Webb pivoted, its instruments recalibrated, and at 2:17 GMT, it locked onto 3I Atlas with the NIR spec instrument. What came down in those first packets of data wasn't just unusual, it was historic. The spectra didn't show the icy fingerprint of a comet. They revealed a carbon chemistry so extreme, so volatile, that it made every known solar system body look tame. The decision to override wasn't just a scientific choice, it was a silent alarm. The most advanced telescope ever built had just paused the cosmos to chase the system. The deeper scientists dove into Webb's data, the harder it became to find anything familiar. The carbon dioxide to water ratio was completely out of range. But it was the metal profile that tore the rulebook apart. In every comet, every asteroid, every meteorite ever studied, iron and nickel traveled together. They are born in the same stellar forges, bonded by physics and fused in ancient explosions. The ratio may vary slightly, but the partnership is absolute. Not here, in 3I Atlas. Nickel was everywhere and iron was gone. Not reduced, not hidden, gone. Every test came back clean. Ultraviolet spectrograph teams cross-referenced over a dozen known iron lines. None appeared. Nickel, by contrast, lit up the spectrum like a floodlight, wavelengths stacking at 3,415, 3,524, and 3,769 angstroms, all clearly above the noise. The only known process capable of such separation in a laboratory requires extreme energy, industrial pressures, and precise control. The team proposed one explanation: the presence of nickel carbonyl, a volatile compound that vaporizes at just 43 degrees Celsius. But even this rare molecule fails to explain the total absence of iron. The result was a spectral fingerprint that matched nothing natural, not bored, not Oumuamua, nothing. A chemical composition so skewed, so deliberate, that even the most conservative voices began asking an unthinkable question. What kind of place, what kind of world, or what kind of technology could produce this? The strangest part of the mystery didn't come from deep space. It came from Earth, from museums, tombs, and ancient texts that speak of iron from the sky. The Egyptians called it metal of heaven. The blade buried with King Tutankhamun contains nearly 11% nickel and assembled to forge with ancient tools, yet perfectly matching the chemical signature of meteorites. Babylonian scribes wrote of falling stars and burning stones, often paired with omens of war and destruction. Across the ancient Near East, elite artifacts, rings, beads, daggers appear crafted from metals richer in nickel than any terrestrial or metals that fell, that flashed, and inspired awe and fear alike. And now, in 2025, we look to the sky again and see the same signature: high nickel, no iron, no known source. The Widman-Staton pattern, the crystalline banding that only forms in space-forged metal, is etched into relics older than cities. Historians and physicists alike are now asking the question no one ever dared to ask. What if those artifacts weren't just meteoric fragments, but evidence of contact? What if those metals weren't merely debris from the stars, but fragments of something that had come before, something that had already passed through? And what if 3I Atlas isn't just the next anomaly, but the next chapter in a very old book, one we've only just begun to read? As scientists continued analyzing the high nickel exhaust and CO-rich emissions, a researcher at Caltech noticed something troubling hidden within the thermal data. Buried inside the glow patterns from 3I Atlas was a subtle, but regular electromagnetic rhythm, a frequency pulse too everyday to be random, but too faint to be an intentional broadcast. The net sensors had recorded it, but first of all dismissed it as instrumentation noise. It wasn't. When the emission statistics were sonified, converted to audible waveforms, it revealed a repeating beat, not song, not language, but something even more chilling: a mathematical cadence, prime durations, Fibonacci ratios, geometric harmonics that echoed systems discovered in DNA, in crystal growth, inside the layout of historical architecture. The signal wasn't strong enough to transmit across space, but strong enough to be detected by any observer nearby. In other words, it was a breadcrumb trailoform of cosmic fingerprint embedded not in radio waves, but in the behavior of the object itself. And if we could hear it, others could too. The question wasn't who the signal was aimed at. The question was who else had already heard it. Only days after the internet override triggered worldwide attention, geophysicists in the southern hemisphere began detecting anomalies in Earth's magnetic field. Initially disregarded as fluctuations caused by minor solar activity, the truth became harder to ignore. In multiple locations, Antarctica, Argentina, Western Australia, identical ULF, ultra-low frequency pulses were registered, spaced at perfect 7.2 intervals, precisely matching the light curve periodicity of 3I Atlas. These pulses failed to follow the patterns of solar storms or lightning strikes. They did not originate from above, but from within the Earth itself. And what's more, they mirrored the structure of the thermal frequency hidden in the object's emissions. Something deep within the Earth had begun to resonate, not loudly, not violently, but rhythmically, as if responding, coordinating, like a tuning fork catching the hum of a forgotten tune. The idea that Earth's ancient systems, tectonic, electromagnetic, even biological, might synchronize with something passing through the solar system is terrifying, not because it implies danger, but because it implies history. That this is not the first time Earth may have heard this frequency before, and that whatever was dormant had just remembered, when plotted from its entry vector to its projected exit trajectory. 3I Atlas's path revealed something nearly too perfect. The object did not simply move through space under gravity's pull. It navigated, it dodged. Its trajectory avoided every major body in the system with astonishing precision, threading between gravitational wells like a spacecraft executing a pre-programmed route. When compared with natural cometary paths, chaotic, warped gravity, reactive, this object behooved with eerie intionale, ity.in. Simulations. Astronomers fed 3I Atlas's data into trajectory models used for planetary slingshot maneuvers, the kind NASA uses to plan interplanetary probes. The result? A 92.6% match with engineered flight paths. And then came something even more haunting. When projected forward, its route intersected a narrow spatial corridor just beyond Saturn's orbita, corridor theorized by some as the location of a hypothetical gravitational point, or even a Lagrange gateway into the outer Eglis. In short, the object wasn't drifting. It was leaving, and doing so with a level of coordination no known natural body has ever displayed. The timing, the position, the acceleration. It all pointed not merely to travel, but to navigation. Not to discovery, but to the execution of a mission, one that appeared almost complete. And then it went dark, just as the James Webb Space Telescope prepared for another round of high-resolution scans precisely as the object crossed within 2.5 astronomical units of the Sun. 31 ATLAS's emissions, both chemical and thermal, began to fade. The nickel spectral lines dimmed, carbon dioxide outflow slowed. The periodic light curve flattened out. Then, abruptly, the object dropped below Webb's detection threshold due to distance or obstruction, but as if it had stopped glowing altogether. This was not a natural fade. It was a shutdown. Every observable behavior ceased within the span of 11 hours. Instruments worldwide confirmed it. Gemini, Subaru, the Very Large Telescope, even ground-based infrared observatories in Chile recorded the same result. 3I Atlas had gone cold. The silence was immediate, deliberate, almost like an act of camouflage, or worse, like the end of a broadcast, because if 3I Atlas had been transmitting, emitting, and reacting until now, maybe it wasn't hiding, maybe it was searching, or activating, or testing, and when it found what it was looking for, it simply stopped. Like a system powering down after completing its final protocol, leaving us not with answers, but with the terrifying realization that we were never in control. We were only observers of something far older and far more patient than anything we had ever imagined. Just when scientists believed 3I Atlas had completed its pass through the solar system, something impossible emerged in the updated trajectory models. Its path, originally predicted to slingshot around the Sun and vanish into deep space, had subtly but decisively altered. Rather than continuing outward, it had shifted ever so slightly back toward the inner system. This was not a gravitational anomaly. The math was tight. The vectors were clear. 3I ATLAS, now silent, now dark, had changed course, and not at random. Its revised trajectory intersected a specific region between Earth and Venus, an area known for stable gravitational Curiously, one of the few regions where several Earth-based satellites had recently reported intermittent signal interference. NASA initially dismissed the rerouting as observational error, but when 3 separate deep space radar facilities, Goldstone, Arecibo, and the Chinese Fast Array, corroborated the change, everything shifted. Because no comet adjusts its course after going dark. No natural object navigates toward a region of minimal detection, and nothing non-sentient performs a maneuver with such surgical, calculated intent, unless, of course, it was never meant to leave but to stay. While engineers and astronomers raced to re-establish optical contact with 3I Atlas, a very different discovery was unfolding inside a laboratory at MIT. There, a neural AI system was fed terabytes of spectroscopic data from Webb and Gemini to identify elements. But to search for structure, NIT found one. The emission patterns of nickel and carbon dioxide, when visualized over time and corrected for rotational variance, formed a multidimensional helix-twisting structure embedded within the time series emissions. At first, it seemed meaningless, but when compared to Earth's earliest biological structures, a disturbing resemblance emerged. Early RNA strands, not exact notches, but geometric parallels, recursions, folds, ratios, enough to make molecular biologists pause. What if 3I Atlas wasn't merely expelling gas? What if it was releasing coded biological scaffolding? Not life, not cells, but something older, something closer to a template. A message written not in sound, but in chemistry, like a seed sealed in amber, waiting for the right environment to take root. And what if Earth or Mars, or some pre-selected point in the solar system, was already conditioned to receive that code? As researchers scrambled to re-establish visual contact, a routine radar ping test was conducted, standard deep space object tracking. But this time, something echoed back, not from 3I Atlas, but from an unexpected direction, the far side of the moon. The signal was not a normal reflection. It returned 0.23 seconds too early and carried spectral artifacts that did not match the original waveform. At first, the anomaly was attributed to surface irregularities, but then it happened again and again. Over 3 consecutive attempts,